sound?
What sound?
That sound.
There's no sound.
Right, but there should be.
What?
Where did Toby Kadachi go?
Oh, I heard he went to Monster Hunter Rise.
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, welcome one and all to a fun little moment of speculation. Given that we have a very quickly upcoming new trailer for Monster Hunter Rise on the horizon, we are bound to learn some sort of new information about various parts of the game very soon. And one of those parts, hopefully, will be the monsters. Now, while the majority of creatures that we've seen so far are absolutely brand spanking new, we have also seen a couple of nice returning faces. One from the new world and one from the old world. I've already talked about the new world choices, so today, ahead of the trailer, I'm locking in my official speculation on the top 5 monsters to return to Rise overall. Though it just so happens that there is no overlap with my new world list anyways. So without further ado, let's begin with
Number 5. Amatsu.
Yes, I've mentioned this one in passing before, but I think Amatsu would be an absolutely sublime creature to bring to this game. Not only because we haven't seen him around for quite a little bit, but also he would fit the aesthetic extremely well from what we've seen so far. And all he really needs as a habitat is a nice tall mountain peak that would be quite reasonable to expect in a game literally called Rise. Not to mention how well the combat would translate to a game with the amount of verticality that Rise looks to have. Between the wire bugs themselves and the revamped climbing system and the environments as a whole, it just seems too perfect to use this against an Elder Dragon that flies through pure control of air. It floats above the ground all the time for the entire fight. And I mean, if I was the person in charge of deciding monster roster for Monster Hunter Rise, and I was told that we wanted a set number of returning monsters, one of my first thoughts about the returning monsters would be things that would benefit from the verticality of the gameplay, and then also things that we haven't seen for a bit. Put both of those together and we've got Amatsu. He fits the bill perfectly. In fact, the only reason that he's back here at number 5 is his power level. Elder Dragons tend to be a rarity in Monster Hunter games, with it being a rare occurrence to have more than a handful show up in a game before its expansion, including both new and returning ones. Then, even past that, Amatsu is a particularly strong Elder Dragon as well, and I doubt they would want to overshadow new Elder Dragons in the story by having a more powerful returning one show up, so it would be a bit more accurate to say, I think this one has a huge chance of being a DLC monster. Assuming that Rise follows a similar sort of schedule to World with its post-release updates. I think it would be hard to fit it into the story, which makes it hard to be in the base monster roster as a whole, but it would be just the perfect monster to have as a whole post-story event about in this game, in my opinion.
Number 4.
Hooray! Bubble Party!
Mizutsune.
And this one is here for a very good reason as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the aesthetic is just a perfect 100% match. It would be incredibly fitting to see this creature in the environments that we've already seen, not to mention the maps that we haven't even yet to see. But if you want to talk likelihood even more, how about the part of the trailer where we have a Palico using healing bubbles on a hunter? That's right, they literally have full-on bubble creation, floating, and popping animations in the game for your cats. And I don't know about you, but I feel like that is a lot of resources for a cat animation that isn't even something that they're already well known for doing. No, it's not like we have cats that often use bubbles. No, it'd make way more sense if this bubble animation already existed in another place in the game for some other reason. Oh, I don't know, like Mizutsune. And they just happen to also repurpose it as the Palico heal. And when you look at it like that, I can't help but feel like Mizutsune is almost a shoo-in for the game. In fact, the combat style makes it even more likely as far as I'm concerned. The amount of slippy, slidey attacks that you could literally wire bug straight up into the air to dodge over just sounds super fun to me. And then on top of that, the bubbles in Mizutsune gear in general had some fun niche effects on hunters, and those are exactly the types of weird things that I want to see back. So maybe there is a little bias on top of this, but bias or not, I feel like Mizutsune is super likely to return in this specific title.
Number 3. Valstrax.
And onto another generation's ultimate monster, we have Valstrax, and this one really hits home for me. Well, I don't think it's necessarily more likely than Mizutsune. I do think that it is on less people's radar for the high possibility that I see here. First up, it's a flagship. With a whole new hunting style and how different of an experience the combat is between the 4th generation and the 5th generation, Capcom did a great job of bringing back some returning fan favorites to give them a notable combat upgrade and animation update and all that fun stuff. But more so than just fan favorites is the note of flagships. How many flagship monsters in the entire series aren't in Iceborne? Legiacris, for skeleton reasons, and then the 4th generation ones except for Glavenus. This leaves Legiacris, Gormagala, Soregios, and Valstrax representing their individual games as the next possible converts to new style hunting. And Legiacris I do give a fair shout to. I do think he'd probably be my number 6 on this list if it was 6 long, so there is that. Gormagala I think would be a struggle to add to the game without also involving Frenzy again, which would be a whole section of the game devoted to him, so it just seems odd, so I'm doubtful on his existence. Soregios I could see, but I do think that Valstrax is just far more likely, and far more of a fan favorite. A big fan favorite, Elder Dragon, who is also a flagship, who was also originally designed by the team that is making Monster Hunter Rise, and on top of that, whose fight would benefit to an extreme degree from the wirebug-based combat that we've seen so far. Even on the level of just the upward dodge, just the jump, you could just do that over a wing tentacle sweep on the floor, and it could change the entire feel of his fight. Just simple little things like that. I think he has a pretty high chance of showing up at a slot, sort of similar to how Kushala was in Monster Hunter World. Not quite as big a deal as he was in his original game, but he's there, and he's very awesome.
Number 2.
I am invisible!
Camelios.
And now we're at the point where I'd be legitimately surprised not to see this creature, except during the fight, when I expect to not see him. Camelios is a near-perfect candidate for entry-tier returning Elder Dragon. He fits the aesthetic to a T, and was near disrespected by his non-inclusion on Monster Hunter World alongside Kushala, Daora, and Teostra. So I feel like he definitely gets a bit of a boost in likelihood just due to that. But that aside, he is a great case as is. I've been waiting for invisible monsters to make a comeback in this new style of hunting, and Camelios is just the father of that. And in a game that most likely won't have Pookie, we have a bit more room for a long-tongued, big-eyed, poisonous lizard monster. And honestly, something about the idea of Camelios still moving the same way that he always did originally, but in the new style of movement for the hunters, makes me smile. His movement was always so jagged, but very purposefully so. Where some things moved clunkily just because that's the way the technology was, Camelios was always very purposefully moving. And it would just be such a fun change of pace to get him in a game like Rise, I think. So yeah, I would actually be surprised if Camelios isn't in the game.
Number 1.
And it was like a blob. It was a liquid-filled sack, whitish clear sack. And we took it out, and this is it right here.
Kezu and Giganox.
And this one is sort of cheating, but sort of not. I think individually, both Kezu and Giganox have an absolutely massive chance of being in the game, given the creepy atmosphere that we've been shown so far and the yokai-inspired monsters. We literally have some demonic creatures as inspirations for monsters going on in the game. So what would fit more than either of these cave dwellers? Assuming there is a cave, but there's always a cave somewhere. But past that, I am 99.9% certain that one of them will be in the game, like unbelievably certain. They weren't in World or Iceborne, they're classic monsters of their own unique side of existence, and they both like climbing around the environment a bit, which just happens to line up with the enhanced vertical movement us hunters will have for Rise. It just feels way too perfect to me, too right, too fitting to have at minimum one of these guys in here, if not the pair of them together. If I had to choose one, it would probably be Giganox simply due to it being longer since he was in a Monster Hunter game, but I would also argue that Kezu is more iconic as this type of monster. So in a conversation of likelihood, I find it really hard to separate them or put one over the other, which is pretty much why they're in this spot together. Okay, maybe I broke my own system a little bit, but the statement stands nonetheless. One of these two will almost certainly be in the game. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been my list of the top 5 most likely returning monsters for Monster Hunter Rise. Do you agree with any of my choices, or do you think that there are others more likely than any of the creatures I talked about here? Regardless of likelihood, which monsters do you actually want to return to the game for Monster Hunter Rise? Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes when they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or report important news about the kingdom Animalia. Rage, Cotton, and Hollow are all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros, there's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.